I want to be able to hear God, and not because I'm preoccupied.
Challenge me!
You got to be willing to do what God tells you. Philippians 3 and verse 14 says this. Paul says these amazing words. I press toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus. Then he goes on in 2 Timothy, the 4th chapter, and verse number 7, and says something amazing. He said, I, Paul, have fought the good fight of faith. I have finished my course, and I've kept the faith. I love that one word in the middle that talks about, I've fought the good fight of faith, I've kept the course. And I just want to talk to you for a few moments about staying the course. To continue to do something in spite of, to finish what you start, to complete what you have promised, to accomplish what you have attempted in spite of any form of opposition or obstacle. To stay the course. Stay the course in your marriage. Stay the course in your commitment toward Jesus Christ. Stay the course in your friendships and your relationships. Stay the course in any area of your life. Stay the course. I remember many years ago I was running a race and happened to be a triathlon, and it was toward the end. It's the third leg of the triathlon. It's the running portion. And I began running along the race. I think it was around 6 miles of a race, about a 10K, the running portion of this particular triathlon. And there were 2 guys ahead of me, and I was just, trying to catch them. And I moved closer and I moved closer, and we went around a bend, and one guy went right and one guy went left. I followed the guy to the right, and what happened was I found out he was not in the race. He was a friend of the guy, and he was just pacing with him and running with him. See, instead of me running the course, I followed someone else. And in life, there are a lot of people running the race, and we need to run the course that God has set for our lives, the course that God has planned out, the assignments that God has given us. Stop following other people's course, or stop following other people, because it can run you into a ground and not allow you to finish the race. So we talk about set the course. Here's a few examples. Joseph is an amazing individual that in spite of distraction, discouragement, and delays, he's going to stay the course. Nehemiah is an amazing individual who rebuilds the walls of Jerusalem in 52 days. But in spite of the distractions and the discouragement, he is going to stay the course. How about Abraham and Sarah? How about Noah? They're going to stay the course. Noah built an ark for 100 years. You can't tell me, guys, that he didn't feel some sense of discouragement, some sense of loneliness, some sense, is this ever going to pay off? Did I really, really, really hear from God? What is rain? Is it ever going to rain? But yet every day he got out his hammer and he got out his chisel and he nailed and he built. And you can't tell me that people didn't laugh at him, and you can't tell me that people did not mock him, and you can't tell me that people didn't ridicule him. But he just simply stayed on course. Our greatest example of someone that stays on course is Jesus. On the cross, he says, it is finished. The Bible said he set his face like flint toward Jerusalem, the place that he would lay down his life on the cross for all mankind's sin. When it said that he set his face like a flint, it meant he set his face like a rock, simply stable and unmovable. He was not going to be altered. He was not going to change. And you and I need to stay the course of what God told us to do and not get discouraged. Reminds me of the little boy who was trying to put on his cowboy boots in school. He's a little 5-year-old, and he had just finished taking a nap. And so he wanted to go out and play, and he's in the Midwest where it gets cold, and So he tries to gather his scarf and get ready. And so he's pulling up his boots, and he's having a heck of a time pulling up the boots. And so a good teacher sees him struggling, and so she tries to help him. And you know what? She's sweating, she's perspiring. This thing is turning into a major accomplishment and a major job. Till finally they get the boots on, and he looks down and he says, "You put them on the wrong feet." So she labors to take them off again. And put them on the right feet, and she's struggling again to put them on and put them on and put them on till finally they go on. And she looks at him and says, "You know what? Do they fit well now?" And he says, "These aren't my boots." And so she's frustrated. So she takes the boots off and she says, "Where are your boots?" She said, "Oh, these are my brother's boots that my mom sent with me." So there she goes. She puts them back on his feet. She's a good teacher, so she's trying to keep herself real dignified and have that little smile on her face, little sunshine face. And so she finally gets them on and she says, "Now you could go and play. But where are your mittens? Because you're going outside and it's cold." And he said, "They're on the bottom of the boots." So there she goes. She had to take the boots off. That's a woman that stayed on course. And what you and I have to do is stay on course. Again, I'm a former athlete. I'm a former triathlete and marathon runner. And there's one race that will go down in history as the worst race that I ever ran. It was not a race that I necessarily lost. It was not a race that necessarily I didn't run my best. But it was a race that when you see my name at the end of the race, there is a word next to it, 3 initials, called DNF. DNF means this: Diego started the race, but he did not finish. And I don't know about you. I don't want to walk around with that regret and that remorse that I have a DNF next to my name in my marriage and in the raising of my kids and in the promises and vows and commitments I make to Jesus Christ. I don't want to have a DNF next to my life. So here's a few things that you and I need to know if we're going to stay the course. When you stay the course, when you and I stay the course, we have to stay it beyond what gets old and boring and mundane and not always want new. You have to stay beyond what gets old. You know, everybody wants newness. When things get kind of mundane, well, I just want a new wife. I just want a new husband. I just want a new church. I just want a new job. I just want a new car. I just want a new house. I want to move out of the state. And sometimes new is not always the answer. Sometimes you need to stay the course. Sometimes a new wife isn't going to bring you happiness. Sometimes a new church isn't going to bring you happiness. You have to stay the course through something that's boring and old and mundane, and trust God that there's fruitfulness going to come out of that relationship, productivity that's going to come out of that commitment. But don't let something that becomes old and mundane make you move away from your commitment. To stay the course, you have to be willing to be optimistic. You have to be willing to believe that something is possible. Stay with an expectation, stay hopeful, and stay positive. You have to be willing to stay optimistic. If you're going to stay the course, you got to believe that tomorrow is going to be better. You got to believe that one day I'm going to accomplish what God told me to accomplish. I'm going to succeed in this area of struggle. If you're going to stay the course, you have to remain optimistic. You got to stay up. You got to be positive. Reminds me of the little boy who's practicing as he's throwing up the ball in the air and swinging the bat. Because one day he says, I'm going to be the best baseball player, the best hitter ever. I'm going to be the Hank Aaron of my generation. He throws the ball up and he swings strike one. And he throws the ball up and he swings strike two. And he throws the ball up and he swings strike three. And this optimistic kid says this, man, I'm going to be the world's greatest pitcher. Listen, I sometimes watch Jeopardy, not because I'm that smart, but just so that I can answer one question on Jeopardy. Because I believe, when I watch I'm so positive, I'm so optimistic. I think, you know what, today is my day where I'm going to answer at least 2 questions. And sometimes I don't even know the answer, but I just say, Mr. Magoo, to everyone. Mr. Magoo, Mr. Magoo. Just so that I think I'm going to win. You know, I'm not a good golfer, but when I step up to the tee, I don't care if you're Tiger Woods, I think I can beat you. Then I hit the ball and then I remember I can't. But I want you to be an optimistic person. Don't let life beat you up. Don't let life defeat you, that you walk around with your head down thinking that it's never going to happen for you. The Bible said, if God be for us, who can be against us?
If you're looking for a real church with real people and live near Los Angeles or Inland Empire, we love to have you at Abundant Living Family Church. Here you can meet new friends, find a place to heal, and learn how to live an abundant life. So come as you are.
If you and I are going to stay the course, you have to be willing to walk alone and not always follow the crowd. You got to be willing to walk alone. Joseph walked alone. Jesus walked alone at the cross. All forsook him. The crowds were around for the miracles. The crowds were around for the teaching. The crowds were around for the fishes and the loaves. The crowds were around for the healings and the miracles. But on the cross, no one was to be found. And if you and I are going to walk this road, it's a lonely road sometimes. But you have to be willing to do what God told you to do in spite of what the crowd says. So many people want to ask other people their opinion on what God told you to do. And all that matters is that God is with me. Are you going to go tonight? Are you going to do this? Are you supporting this? So you're going to make it. I'm going to make my decision on what God told me to do and my commitments to Christ based on someone else? I don't think so. But if you and I are going to stay the course, you and I have to be willing to walk alone. My decisions and my commitments I make unto Jesus Christ. Everything I do as unto the Lord. I don't necessarily do it to get an applause or an approval of man. I'm doing it in my devotion to Jesus Christ. You've got to be willing to walk alone. If you're going to stay the course, it's sometimes lonely because the crowd isn't always going to be around. My third example, hopefully my last one, of running a marathon and competing. Here's what I know in the several marathons I've run. There are thousands of people on the starting line. Hundreds of people, upwards of 25, 35, just based upon the marathon, 40,000 people at the starting line. But watch the end of a marathon. If you ever watch the end of a marathon, the crowd has thinned out. There ain't no one cheering anymore. Hey, hey, ho, ho. They just come straggling in. They kind of have lost their smile. They kind of lost their joy. I just believe that if you're going to stay the course, then you have to be willing to do something alone. And you got to recognize that you're not always going to get the support you need. You're not always going to get the thank you. You're not always going to get, the pat on the back. But what you do as unto the Lord. You do it as unto the Lord. Today, some of you may be living with a spouse that does not appreciate you. And you're longing for a thank you. You're longing for an appreciation. But I want you to know that God sees what you're doing today. And sometimes it's a lonely road, but I want you to know, look to Jesus. He'll be your source of comfort. He'll be your source of strength. And what you do as unto the Lord, even if people do not acknowledge you or say thank you to you. Stay the course. Stay the course means that you can't always be in a rush. Sometimes there's no shortcuts, no cutting in the line. Sometimes there's no quick fix, and sometimes there's no instant. In South Dakota in the Black Hills, there's a monument called Crazy Horse Monument. Mr. Zolinsky started it in 1948, and it will not be finished until 2050. Over 100 years, You say, how can someone live that long? Well, now his children and possibly his children and his grandchildren will finish the project that he started. Some things are going to take a long time. And if you're going to stay the course, you've got to be willing not to be in a rush. You got to be patient. Because some things take time to change in a marriage. Sometimes people have issues in their life and you have to be patient with them before they change. Some things aren't going to happen overnight that you're going to rebound from a bankruptcy. Sometimes we're facing health issues and we want to get back to our lives the way they were before we were inflicted or sick. But we got to learn how to wait. We got to learn how to be patient. And so if you're going to stay the course, you can't always be in a rush. You can't always be in a rush to get your finances in order. You can't always be in a rush. It's amazing how many young people will not take minimum wage jobs. It's amazing how many people will not work because they believe the job is below them and that they are overqualified. Sometimes things aren't going to come instantly with a promotion and increase. Sometimes God starts you with a basement job and he'll bring you to the penthouse if you're faithful. If you're faithful. So stay the course. Some things take a little time before they come to pass. How many of you have ever been on the freeway driving somewhere? Somebody has given you directions, but it seems to be taking you a little bit longer than it should. So you begin to panic. And what you begin to decide is, I'm going too far. And there's something in you that says, stay the course, stay on the freeway. And then there's something in you that says, no, get off and turn back and retrack your steps. So you land up getting off the exit and retracking, and then you find out through whoever, or, through navigation, or you call the person, and they tell you, if you just would have stood on the freeway, it was the next exit. I've been guilty of that so many times. Stay on course. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer than you think it should. To stay on the course means that you have to have a good conscience. You have to have a good conscience. The Bible says this, having faith and of good conscience, which some having rejected concerning the faith have suffered shipwreck. He's saying people in these last days are going to fall away from their belief and their commitments to Christ. Why? Because they lost consciousness of who God was, the conviction of who God was. And if you and I are going to stay on course, then we've got to hold to the values, the vows. We got to hold to the promises that we made to God. We have to have conscience. That I promised it, so I've got to do it, even to my own hurt. Everything in me wants to stop. Everything in me wants to abort. Everything in me wants to quit. But my conscience is saying, you promised, now do it. And that's what God needs in this hour. People that will stay on course who have a heavy conscience, a sensitive conscience. I remember when I sold shoes, going through Bible school. And my manager would tell us that after you have waited on a customer, whether you sold the shoes or whether you didn't sell the shoes, you need to pick your shoes up and you need to take them back to the room and you need to stock them before you come out and wait on the next customer. The purpose was so that all these boxes would not be on the floor and could cause an accident. We trip over, it would just not be a messy scene for new customers to come. And I remember this one particular time, there were customers coming in all the time, and because you make commission, man, I didn't want to go back and put my boxes away. So I halfway obeyed what my manager said. I got all the boxes, I lifted them up, and I turned the corner, and I hid them in a little cubicle, and I said, when it's less crowded, I'll come back, and I'll put them back in stock. And I remember the feeling, what that felt like. When I urgently ran out again to greet the next customer, immediately I felt convicted in my heart that I didn't hold to the promise that I had made. And so what I said, I remember I excused myself and I went back and I filed all those 7.5 ladies' shoes, the brown, the black, the purple, and the yellow, back in his slot, and I went out there. and I waited on the customer. And that's what a conscience does. A conscience makes you go back and make things right. Not be so new to go forward and try something new and make new commitment. Wait a minute. Have I made some promises that I've not kept? And I now got to go back and fulfill those promises before I move on to new relationships and new promises and new commitments. Conscience makes you go back and make things right.
In June of 2008, I was diagnosed with terminal cancer. In fact, it was kidney cancer, stage 4, a very aggressive cancer. When you hear terms like hopeless, helpless, finality, conclusion, end, you start reaching. You start reaching for hexes and potions and liquids and antidotes and solutions, and you're Googling to find out the history of something, and friends and family are passing on their levels of wisdom of where to travel, and research is being done over here and there. It can almost seem overwhelming.
If you or someone you know is facing extreme life challenges, there is hope. Visit us online at realwithdiegomesa.org and order How to Dream When You're Told You're Going to Die. This book chronicles his journey from stage 4 cancer to complete healing, cancer-free. This inspirational story is not about cancer. It's about hope and faith for everything that we face. Order your copy today.
I believe God's love and compassion is for everyone. I believe that the Word of God brings life to every situation. That's for everyone. Every other thing might be a little bit different, but at the end of the day, I give all glory and honor to God for my healing. It's He that healed me, not anything else, but the number one thing was God who healed me. He may have used other things, but Jesus truly was my healer.
It's about hope and faith for everything that we face. Get your copy today.
If you and I are going to stay on course, we must have a great love for God. We've got to have a great love for God. Herbert and Zalma Fisher have been married for 86 years. They have a great love for one another. I'm sure that nothing was perfect in their life, and I'm sure that they had reasons to get a divorce or separate. But they had a high level of love toward one another. And Jude 1:21 says, keep yourself in the love of God. That blows me all away all the time, every time I read it. Blows my mind when I read it. So many times we think it's God's responsibility to keep us in love with Him. But you ever thought it's your responsibility to stay in love with Him? Keep yourself. I've got to keep myself in the love of God. I've got to keep myself in love of God. My love for God. And if you're going to stay the course, you've got to stay in love with God. Keep that fire burning. Keep that twinkle in the eye. Keep that passion that you feel. Keep that excitement that you feel. Keep that energy. Keep that emotion. I've been married almost 32 years, and I have to keep myself. She has to keep herself in love with us because we could get bored with one another. We get tired with one another. So we've got to challenge ourselves to keep giving and not grow comfortable with each other. We've got to keep ourselves in love. I got to force conversations. I have to take her down a road that maybe I don't know something about her, to rediscover her. I have to have conversations about how is your day. I have to compliment her on things that are going to keep myself in love with her. Likewise, she does. And you have to keep yourself in love with God if you and I are going to stay the course. I'm going to read you a story. It's one of my favorite heroes in the faith. His name is John Wesley. And this is written in his diary. This is 1 week in John Wesley's life, who was a great preacher in the 1850s. It says, Sunday a.m., May the 5th, preached in St. Anne's, was asked not to come back anymore. Sunday PM, May 5th, preached at St. John's. Deacon said, get out and stay out. Sunday AM, May 12th, preached at St. Jude's. Can't go back there either. Sunday PM, May 12th, preached at St. George's. Kicked out again. Sunday AM, May 19th, preached at St. Somebody Else's church. Deacon called a special meeting and said I couldn't return. Sunday PM, May the 19th, preached on the streets, kicked off the streets. Sunday AM, May 26th, preached in a meadow, chased out the meadow as a bull was turned loose during the service. Sunday AM, June the 2nd, preached at the edge of a town, kicked off the highway. Sunday PM, June the 2nd, afternoon service, preached in a pasture, and 10,000 people came to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ. That is a man that stayed on course. Denial, rejection, failure, defeat. And that might be where you're at today. Doors are closed in your life. Things are getting tough. Obstacles in your life. But I want to challenge you in your marriage. I want to challenge you in your faith. I want to challenge you in your relationship with Jesus Christ. I want to challenge you with your commitments to stay on course.
Where will you spend eternity? That's a prevailing thought today. I want you to recognize that mankind, human beings, live in three realms. They live in the earth realm, they live in the heaven realm, and they live in the hell realm. Now, most people believe that there is a heaven realm. Many don't believe that there's a hell realm. But we all believe there's an earth realm because we live here. How do we know that earth is real? Because you see, because you feel, because you hear, because you smell. So no one can talk you out that earth is not real. But I want you to recognize in the other two realms where human beings exist, it's just as real as this earth realm. In heaven and in hell, there are smells. There are voices. You hear things. You feel things. He said, I am the resurrection and the life. He that believeth in me, though he were dead, yet shall he live. See, he's called the everlasting God. And he's the only one that can guarantee your future because he's the only one that was raised from the grave. He came to this earth to provide for you so that you never have to experience the eternal existence in hell, but you experience the eternal existence in heaven. I want you today to know that you are an eternal being. One day you're going to die, and I pray it's 100 years from now. But I want to ask you this question. Where are you going to spend eternity and why? Give your life to Jesus Christ today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for your support. It's been real.
Challenge me!
You got to be willing to do what God tells you